You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I'm your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 73. In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing Gavin Reese, who grew up in the rural American Southwest. He eventually moved to the big city with his family and considers both New Mexico and Arizona home. Gavin is an active police officer, so he has an amazing background as an actual cop. I interviewed a lot of crime fiction writers. This is the first time I interview someone who actually has real life experience as a police officer. So it was fascinating to talk to him about his background and how he parlays that into his novels. So you can stay tuned for that. Gavin has several series out. His latest book is The Absolver, which is the beginning of his St. Michael thriller series, and we'll get all into that during the interview. Before that, though, I just want to let you know I'm participating in another book sweeps giveaway, and I wanted to let you know about that. If you go to thrillingreads.com/book sweeps, you can enter to win over 30 free thrillers, including my own, my latest Odd Jobs, and as well as an e-reader and some other fun stuff. So go check it out at thrillingreads.com/book sweeps. I appreciate your support. And okay, so here we go. My interview with Gavin Reese coming right up. Hi, everybody. This is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author, and on the phone I have Gavin Reese. Gavin, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Alan. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming out to the podcast. Can you tell our listeners about yourself?
I like long walks on the beach and campfires at night, and I started out writing, well, I guess probably in like junior high school, but the short, I guess, overview went through a few different professions, worked in finance and chemistry, and eventually ended up getting into law enforcement when all my cop buddies were having a whole lot more fun at work and doing what I thought were vastly more important things than I was, and spent quite a bit of time doing that. And in the last few years, I started writing again. I took some time off from writing, mostly because I simply was too busy being a cop to also try to write. And got injured at work, actually. And while I was recovering, I started writing a novel that it was actually didn't intend it to be a novel. It was just writing mostly for catharsis. And by the end of the thing, it was way too long and way too big, but I was very confident it was going to be published. So I started looking at some options with that. And I write mostly crime thrillers that are based on my work and experience as a cop. And I'm just starting to get into conspiracy writing, conspiracy thrillers, and basically try to bring a whole lot of authenticity to my work based on what I've actually seen and actually done, and the things that I know that a lot of fiction writers and a lot of Hollywood doesn't really get right with the details.
And were you a fan of thrillers and mysteries as a reader before you actually started to write them yourself?
Yeah, I grew up, the first novel that I remember being totally enthralled and fascinated with was Tom Clancy's Hunt for Red October. And following that book, I read thrillers and some police stuff, but mostly crime and thrillers for, I guess, the last probably 30 years. And I genuinely enjoy the genres. I like mystery, and it's, for me, I like reading a good mystery and trying to figure out the whodunit, and I also like reading a thriller where I know whodunit and trying to, encourage the main character to hurry up and figure it out so he can save the day. But yeah, I've long been a fan of the genres, and I'm really, really excited that we've started getting some very positive feedback on my work, and that it seems like there's at least a couple folks that I'm not related to who seem to enjoy reading the books too.
Yeah, that's always the fun part.
Yes.
And so now you had mentioned before about reading crime thrillers, and you being that you're actually a cop, a police officer living that life. Is that a I mean, it must be great to have all that information in your head from real life experience, but is it a balance to like make it fictional and, you know, suspenseful and then still keeping it like realistic?
Yeah, and that's a really, really good question, and it's a little bit complicated actually. So I get to cheat the system because, you know, where most fiction writers, they have to go befriend a cop, or they have to go do ride-alongs, or they have to volunteer at a police department to even learn a lot of the inside language or a lot of the things that are very specific to that culture. And I get to skip over all of that. So I also get to write based on my own personal experience. So the cases that I've worked, the trainings that I've gone to, the things that I and my partners have actually done in real life and, you know, at speed and at risk of ourselves and those around us. So I get to draw on all that, which makes it a lot faster process, I think, for me to write than a lot of fiction authors. But that also means I carry a tremendous burden in doing that. If I'm going to try to cheat the system there effectively, I really have to be very cautious and very aware of making sure that I'm protecting the crime victims, and that no one who reads any one of my stories should ever be able to pick it up and identify any part that they had in creating the story, whether it's a suspect, a witness, or a criminal defendant. I don't want anyone to either get, you know, re-victimized by hearing about their story in fiction, or some guy in lockup in cell block 4 getting some kind of notoriety because his crime's been publicized. So one of the probably the best examples so far is one of the shorter stories I wrote. It's called Room Number 3, but it deals with some pretty heinous crimes and deals with them in. It's a little bit more raw, I think, than a lot of readers or a lot of folks are used to read and used to dealing with. But I still had to draw a very careful line between how can I word this, how can I phrase things to make sure the readers understand what's happening, they get the point, they have the emotional reaction I want them to have without them throwing the book down in anger and disgust and being so upset by basically the harsh realities of things. And, you know, so that was actually the first book where I started getting some feedback from readers that the characters swore a little bit. And, you know, for me and in my experience, I thought it was the language was very authentic, very real, and is what actually happens in most police departments behind closed doors. But I took that advice, or that criticism rather, and put that to work on all the future publications that, you know, now I'll write it as I imagine it, or as I think it should be or would go in real life, and then I'll go back and, you know, Control F and look for all the four-letter words and do a quick count and find out how many times I'm subjecting readers to a little bit too much reality.
Yeah, I always find it so intriguing that it seems readers get more upset over swearing than the violence.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a surprise. I didn't expect that to be the criticism, but you know, I am happy to try to dial that back a little bit. I think, you know, as much as I would like to say I'm just going to be completely authentic, you know, the reality is if no one's willing to read it, it really doesn't matter. And I'd like someone else to enjoy it besides just my blood relatives.
Yeah, that's a good point. You got to make it marketable. To listen to what the readers want and what they're saying. So that's a good that's a very valid point. So how would you describe your books to someone who has not read any of your previous novels before? I believe you have 3 series out, right?
Yeah, so we've got I've got 2 that are out right now, and one that's out right now, which is the Alex Landon crime thriller series, and that's centered around a detective named Alex Landon. The second series, which comes out in November, launches on November 19th, is the St. Michael thriller series, and that one is centered around a priest named Michael Thomas. And then there's going to be a third series launching in just a couple months, and eventually they're all in parallel or the same universe, same timeline, different characters. And I think there's going to be some tremendous opportunity as all this progresses for them to eventually, occasionally cross over and intertwine for a book or two here or there. But I for the folks who've never seen the website or never heard of me, I think only about 8 people have. There's effectively I try to write really authentic. Publishers refer to it as hard-boiled crime. I think just because of the harsh reality that I do depict, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to really effectively strike a balance between, letting readers see what life is really like for the investigators and the victims and their families, and still putting a product together that's palatable. That I really think, for the most part, people. Crime readers, citizens in general, there's only so much, I think, of the harsh reality that they really want to see and want to be exposed to. And from my perspective, I really think that part of my job, part of our job as cops, is to try to prevent as much of that reality from entering everyone else's world as possible.
Yeah, and then you're saying that the crossover world point of it, that's really cool. I can imagine like Michael Connelly when you have Willie Bosch and his half brother, the Lincoln lawyer. I can't remember his name. They keep popping up in each other's novels. That's a cool aspect that you'll be able to do with your series. Now, is this set in an actual city, or is it a city that you've made up?
Yeah, so the Alex Landon series, because that one is based very closely on my own work and my partner's work and our cases. That one is set in a fictional city, and so I didn't want to give too much blame or too much credit to any particular police department or organization or anybody that was out there working the streets right now. And so I created a fictional city that's located on the far west side of the Phoenix metro area, called Dry Creek, which is effectively just about every creek in that part of the world is dry. So it worked out really well. But they're basically facing the same realities in Dry Creek that any other police agency in Arizona and Central Arizona and especially Phoenix Metro are looking at, with high rates of drug trafficking, of even the drug related violence, a lot of the same issues with even just basic everyday violence escalating on the streets when the heat index gets above 100. There is a very strong correlation between assault rates and temperature, and that's a huge problem when you live in a concrete jungle. So, so I tried to put Dry Creek in a setting that's very realistic, and I've even made sure that all the addresses or all the locations in Dry Creek coordinate with the overall Phoenix Metro address system. So someday, even though it doesn't exist right now, someday someone's probably going to build something at the same address to one of my locations, and I'm going to have to try to figure out how to deal with that in 15 or 20 years.
Oh, that's fascinating. So even though you're making up the whole area, you're still trying to be accurate with the locations and the addresses and putting time to research that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'd really like for my readers to have a hard time deciding what's fiction and what's reality. So with the forthcoming series, St. Michael series. That one we're placing in all real locations around the world. There's only a couple places that the characters spend a whole lot of time that are the cities are all real, and they're based on some real locations. But for example, the family ranch that the main character grows up on is entirely fictionalized, but the archdiocese that he attends and eventually has to answer some questions to them. That's a very real place in Albuquerque.
And so this is the Absolver, Rome. That's the one that's coming up in November 19th.
That is, yeah. We're incredibly excited about it. I feel like it's probably the most original story I've ever written, and I'm really looking forward to getting some reader feedback on it, and I'd really like to see this become a very long-term series.
Oh, and so the investigator here is the priest, Father Michael Thomas.
Yeah, it's I guess if I had to try to sum it up in one short sentence, which I'm not good at, you may have noticed I'm a little long-winded, but if I had to sum it up in just a quick synopsis, it's effectively the story of a priest who's kind of has a bit of a crisis and is forced to question what are the limits of moral violence and justified self-defense and justified defense of another. And in writing it, I've tried really hard to blend all of my favorite elements from some of my favorite characters and franchises. So, readers who are familiar with these other series might, recognize that, there's some elements of Harry Bosch in there and some elements of Jason Bourne and some Robert Langdon and even some Dexter from the TV show. And I think it's going to be a really original and very interesting ride. And I think it's really, this guy's having to face a lot of the same questions and all the same dilemmas that I think have faced mankind since we first learned to turn a stick into a club. And, what are our obligations to ourselves and to each other when we've been wronged?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I really like your cover too for the Absolver. It's a cool cover. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude. I got picked up last year by Tim Flanagan of Cyanide Publishing, so I have to give him 100% credit for that cover. I had absolutely nothing to do with it except approving it. But Tim does a fantastic job. He's done all the covers and all the publications, and I've been exceptionally grateful to have made his acquaintance and been working with him. So he did a great job on that. He made it really hard to pick the cover. Actually, there were 3 he sent over, and I told him I wanted all 3.
That's a good problem to have.
It is. It's a very nice problem to have.
Yeah. So now, so obviously you use a lot of, you already mentioned about using things that you've experienced in your life as a police officer. And what about your own personality? Does that make it to any of your characters?
Yeah, I think I'm sure more of it makes them than I realize. My intent is to try to, just as I'm blending stories to try to, I guess, camouflage some of the origin of the crimes or the victims and some of the things that happen with the crime series. I try diligently to do the same thing with characters. So, for example, if somebody were to look at one of the primary antagonists in the Alex Landon series, they should see a combination of personalities if they really looked at it. If they knew me, knew where I worked, and knew the guys I worked with, none of them will directly correlate to any one character, and I've tried to do the same thing when folks first get introduced to the series. It's pretty common for them to wonder, because I'm writing based on my own experiences, if the detective is based on me. If Alex Landon is supposed to be some semblance of me, and he's not. He's somebody that we share a lot of experiences, and we've seen and done a lot of the same things. But I intentionally try to write him to be better than I am, from I guess just a general humanitarian perspective. And so I try to blend different personalities that I've worked with or met, even from the criminals that I've arrested and interacted with or used as informants over the years. None of them directly get to be dropped into a book. The pieces of them are in different places, even, with rare exception. Even the worst criminals generally are not all bad people. There's, some light in them generally. So for the most part, none of the bad guys get to be all bad, and none of the good guys get to be all good. I try to make it a little more authentic than that.
And so what's your writing process like? Do you outline everything before you start to write?
It's so The Absolver is publication number 8. And when I first started writing the original book, it's got to be 730 some pages and like 184,000 words before.
Wow.
It was a mammoth paperweight, and so that got broken up into 2 books: Enemies Domestic, which was the first publication, and then the second half of that original got broken up and made into Enemies Foreign. So the process when I first started writing that book was effectively that I kind of had a general idea of where I was going to go, but I was a little bit more of a pantser. So I would really just write whatever I felt like writing that day. I didn't necessarily have a goal or objective in mind. It was just, I feel like writing this hostage scene, so I'm going to do that today, regardless of the order of the chapter. And over time, my writing process has become very much focused on an outline. And so when it took me writing on and off with no real goal in mind and kind of a pantser mentality of writing what I want when I want, it took me 7 years, front to back, from the first word to publication of Enemies Domestic. And fast forward, I guess, 18 months, and last November, we had just published Enemies Foreign, like November 14th or something. And about a week later, I went to a writing retreat with Derek Murphy and met some fantastic authors there. And in that week, I showed up to stay in his borrowed castle in Austria. And I showed up on Sunday with an outline, and I celebrated Saturday night with a complete first draft.
Oh, wow.
So, the process for me has evolved, almost 180 degrees. And it's pretty rare anymore that I'll really do much without putting an outline together first. While I've been working on The Absolver, and, this, I guess, just the process for me is, I don't know if it's going to just continue to change for my whole writing career, if it's just still not settled. But while I was working on The Absolver and getting the draft ready, I started using a new software called Shakespeare, and I had never run into it before, I guess about 3-4 months ago. And that software allowed me to very easily work on effectively 5-6 books at once. So while I was typing The Absolver, it would occur to me that some detail or a conversation would become important in a later book, and I could go ahead and easily jump over to that and make a quick note, a quick outline, quick chapter details. And so by the time that I got the Absolver draft finished, I had somewhere between, I think the smallest book is probably about 2,500 words up to about 12,000 words done on another 6 books in this series. So the process is still evolving. I've really enjoyed writing the Absolver, and the process I used for that more than anything else. So I think probably going forward, I'm going to be really diligent whenever I'm writing a series, I think, to try to keep those details consistent, and I'll probably keep plugging along and at least putting pieces into additional novels, even as I'm working on, today's draft.
That's fascinating about that software, because I heard about it for the first time myself a couple months ago. So it's cool to see that you actually use Shakespeare and it helped you out with your practice. Looks like it's a really cool software, but I haven't used it myself.
Yeah, I've been really, really happy with it. I did everything in Word until, probably last January, February, and another author friend of mine, Vivian Caith, she turned me to Scrivener and talked me into starting that. And I think I'm really my dad makes fun of me that I never have time to do something right, but I've always got time to do something twice. And so part of that kind of infects my writing process, in that, when I got Scrivener, it's to me a somewhat intuitive, but still a pretty detailed program, and so I never put the time in to really become proficient with it. I went through the tutorial and saw the whiz-bang stuff and was really impressed, went ahead and bought it, and then never used any of it, so I quickly forgot how to use anything more than the basic processing. And when I looked at Shakespeare, that is so totally intuitive to me anyway. It works very, very well with the way that my process and my brain work, and the user interface is much more friendly to me. I'm still working on getting the export function down where it puts out the product that I want as a draft. But I'm exceptionally happy with it, and I'll be surprised if I use anything else.
And so when you start writing, do you set goals for yourself, like word count goals or anything like that, to keep yourself on track?
No, I really need to, but I guess kind of for unconventional reasons. I have I guess maybe an overactive imagination hanging over from when I was a kid. And it's really easy for me to disappear into creative fantasy land. It's much more common that I'll get up and I'm usually out cycling or sitting down typing by 5:30 or 6 in the morning. And it's not uncommon for me to look up from typing and realize it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I didn't eat today. So, I don't tend to struggle with writer's block. I tend to struggle with, lodging myself away from the keyboard and back into reality, for any length of time during the day. And it's, I think the whole writing process and the whole creative, outlet on this is still new enough that, it's like I get to go to recess every time I sit down at the keyboard, and so it's much harder for me to break away and go do real life stuff than it is to come back and step into Fantasyland.
Yeah, that must especially be nice for someone like you who works such a stressful job as a police officer, with kind of escape into that. Because I was looking at your bio. I mean, you've done just about everything as a police officer, like patrol, narcotics, undercover, counterterrorism. It's pretty amazing. So it must be nice to just diffuse it, take it all out in writing.
Yeah, it's definitely a really good creative outlet, and that's when I first started Enemies Domestic, that was really all it was with me trying to get some angst and some frustration out. It was a pretty tough time in my life with injury and just the realities of work and really I guess a target-rich environment would be the positive way to say it. And so to be able to sit down and disappear into that slightly altered reality is very therapeutic. And for me, there's really nothing better that I can do for myself mentally than go put 30 miles on the bike and type, or go run a few miles, hit some desert trails, come back and type. Like keeping that mixed in is a pretty regular part of my schedule. Really does make a noticeable difference for me and how I'm able to adjust and deal with everything else going on in life.
And so, do you still find time to read, or are you too busy with everything going on?
Well, I still try to read as much as I can. I'm definitely a reader first. If I had to make the choice between the two, absolutely, I would rather read than write. But thankfully, I don't have to do that. But I still read quite a lot. And lately, I've been reading a lot of research, getting ready or trying to write the Absolver as an authentic possibility. So I've been reading a lot of nonfiction on related topics. For thrillers, I've actually been burning through a lot of Brad Thor of late. I just finished his Spy Master and stepped into The Last Patriot, I guess, a week ago, and been reading that on and off. And it's largely been a mix of thrillers and nonfiction. Probably the best nonfiction I've read recently is a book called Boston and the American Revolution. It's written. It's by a local historian from Boston, and she does a fantastic job of laying down all the key personalities and key people in the years leading up to the revolution. And it reads like a fiction novel. It's really impressive.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. I like history books. I'm going to check that out. We're done with the call. So what are your future projects now? Are you you between projects now because you got the book coming out, or are you already dived into the next book?
Yeah, I'm already into the next, and I think I finished the Absolver draft on. It's already a blur. It feels like it was a Monday, and I think I was probably already working on the next project by Wednesday. But I'm working on right now on putting together some very specific marketing pieces for the Absolver to create a couple different reader funnels on Amazon, and then also for an email subscriber list. So I'm writing a short story that I've tentatively titled "The Confession of Father Michael," which will be based on or be about the main character from the Absolver series, and just a short, probably 20-25 page story of some tragedy that befalls people close to him and how he handles that. And then I think the next book that I'm probably gonna work on is book number 2 in the Absolver series. Probably only because this being such a new series, I would like to try to give it the best chance of a quicker success in readers being able to more quickly follow up with the second book. We've already got 7 publications in the Alex Landon series, so I feel like I can let that one sit for at least a few months before working on the next book. And I think for any one of the 5 readers who've been following my series so far, I think they're going to be really excited to see that next Alex Landon book and how that I think is going to very effectively tie off some long-term works that have been haunting that series. So I'm really excited to get that one tied up, and then we'll see what's next for Detective Landon.
Yeah, and I noticed that from your website, you have a really cool. If people want to check out your work, they can download the Alex Landon Starter Library for free on your website, GavinReese.com, which I find that's a pretty cool way to introduce people to your writing.
Yeah, that was it. Actually started out as it's 3 chapters from different publications that I intend to make full novels at some point in the series. But we wanted to put something out, especially as an unknown author. Nobody knows who Gavin Reese is. So when people are looking at Amazon or at Facebook, and this pops up, there's really very little incentive for people to trade their hard-earned time and money taking a risk on an unknown author, and especially with the way that, for all the tremendous benefits of independent and self-publishing, there are unfortunately I think a lot of folks that are putting out work that's not really well edited or not really well put together, and so readers are I think running into that enough that it makes them cautious. Where 10, 15 years ago that probably wasn't the case. On the plus side, it obviously makes things a whole lot easier for people to get into publishing, and for stories that deserve to be told authentically and by the people who deserve to tell them. So it's a real double-edged sword, but I tell you all that to tell you this. So we put that together to give readers a sample of what my writing style was like and what the stories and the structure would be like, so that they could trade a few minutes, a couple hours of their time, and I think it was like 99 cents on Amazon, or if you sign up on that email subscription list, that one's still free. So it was an easy way for folks to basically try out my writing style and find out if it's something that they would enjoy before they invested the price of a full book or 5 or 10 hours into something that they may not like. So I was really excited to put it together and to do it.
Yeah, and are you also active on social media? I see your Facebook and Twitter and all the usual haunts where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the Facebook and Twitter, and we have an Instagram account that we don't use all that much. It wouldn't be the place to reach me if you had an urgent question. Certainly don't go to Instagram to call me to come over to put out a fire at your house, because it will burn down before I see that you need help. So we have people can reach us through the website, GavinReese.com, and then through the bigger social media outlets, I guess.
So before I let you go, do you have any advice for aspiring writers? I know we have a few of our listeners are aspiring writers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think, at least from my perspective and my 10 minutes of writing experience, it's been told to me that there are a million different ways to climb the mountain, and I'm certainly still very, very low on the totem pole and still figuring out how to put one foot in front of the other. But to me, the biggest thing that this has brought about is really knowing that it's okay to tell an authentic story, and that I think more than anything else, if you're if you're telling something that is true, that's going to matter a lot more. And if you're telling something that is true and that you believe in, then you're also going to tell a better story, and you're going to write better characters, and you're going to have better plots and better arcs. And if you personally believe in what you're doing and are writing something that you enjoy, even if no one but your mom and your sister buy it, at least you're going to have something that you're proud of and that has been an accomplishment, and it will probably be a good stepping stone. Someone I met last year pointed out that, in their opinion, the first million words are practice. I heard a little while before that it takes a decade of work to become an overnight success. And I think that's something, especially in our current social environment, our current social culture, there's such a disproportionate emphasis, in my opinion, on instant gratification and instant feedback and instant success, when in reality there are exceptionally few people who are truly overnight successes. The band that you fall in love with, they probably put out 5 studio albums before they are really making a living as a band, and they probably played together for 10 or 12 or 18 years before that, working small clubs and venues. And I know of very few, I know no writers personally who are instantly successful off of their first book. And, I think that that's one of the things, I guess, that has been the biggest eye-opener for me, is how the publishing business is so very different from what I expected in the book selling business. And you really do have to treat this as any other small business. So if you want to be a writer, like Harper Lee, you probably need to plan on writing more than one book. And you need to plan on putting in time and putting in actual money into some form of investment, whether it's through the publishing process, whether it's through paying for editors and cover designers, paying for professionals to help really polish your story into what's going to be marketable and favorable and give you the best outcome for all of the hard work you put in. It is surprising to me that the number of hours it takes, even, as I talk about, being able to, having written that first draft in a week, that's still probably 75 hours went into that book. So when someone gets it on their Kindle for, I think it's $2.99 right now. So that's pennies per hour that I personally put into it. So, you have to put together a product that's good, and at least good and probably great. And when you go back to the drawing board and polish, one of the things that kind of helps me with that, keep a good perspective on all that, is I can't remember, as I'm telling the story now, I can't remember which Ernest Hemingway book it was. I want to say it's A Movable Feast, but I think I heard that he rewrote it like 40 times, which is just amazing, because he was doing it on a typewriter. But having to move that one sentence, change that one word, you're at least changing a whole page, maybe a whole chapter at that point. So you've really got to want it, right? But I think that for folks probably to just overall have a more realistic outlook of what the business is and what the effort is that's required. It's Hunter S. Thompson, right? It's writing is easy. All you do is sit down at the keys and bleed.
Yeah.
So it's been a fantastic experience so far. It's been a whole lot of work, truly blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm really excited about what the future looks like, and what even the successes that we've enjoyed so far. I'm incredibly grateful for folks that are enjoying the work and have feedback, and I even appreciate the criticism. I do still read the reviews, and I do still try to very closely take all of the readers' thoughts into consideration, see how I can, the things that are legitimate criticism on what I can work on, and the things that probably we just need to agree to disagree.
All right. Yeah, that's fantastic. Having a little patience is so important in this business.
Yeah.
All right, Gavin. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about your process and your writing. It was a lot of fun and very interesting talking to you.
Well, I greatly appreciate the opportunity, Alan. I'm really grateful to be able to get in front of your fans, and hoping to be back sometime soon with hopefully the next series, and we'll see what we can do. I'd love to get any feedback, and if you guys want to get communication over to me, I'll be happy to answer questions or help out where I can.
All right, and GavinReese.com is probably the best place to find you?
Yes, by far.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. I'd like to ask you to please review and rate this podcast over on iTunes. It really helps me get the word out. If you take a few seconds of your time to do that, it would be much appreciated. You can also visit my website at thrillingreads.com/podcast for show notes on this episode, as well as information about the podcast in general. And you can also sign up for my mailing list there. You'll be getting special offers from our guests, as well as information, behind the scenes information on the podcast. And please do visit my author website at alanpeterson.com. I appreciate your support. And so until next episode, I will talk to you then.